Welcome to this very special edition of the Author's Voice with KAJ, a show where we explore the stories behind the stories. Here we dive into the worlds created by authors, discover their inspirations, and ensure that you walk away enriched and inspired. And today we have with us author Sheila K. Collins. She is an award winning author, grief advocate, and she discovered the power of art in healing after enduring the loss of two adult children. And she has written several books, and the latest one is Warrior Mother, Fierce Love, Unbearable Loss, and the Rituals That Heal. So we'll talk about that story. Let's dive into the story behind the story. Welcome to the show, Sheila.
Well, thank you so much for, it's great to return, to see you again. So I very much enjoy it. Yes.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to, this new version, new platform, Author's Voice with KJ, but it's all about stories. Earlier or also on the KJ Masterclass, we talked about, but more on your expertise. This time, we talked, that time we talked about your other book much more, but this one will be on, Warrior Mother, Fierce Love, Unbearable Loss, and Rituals That Heal. We'll talk about that. But before, whatever introduction that I give for you, Sheila, that's not enough. Only you can tell your own story apart from 10. So let's hear a bit about your journey, your background, so that people know who they are listening to, Sheila.
Okay. Well, I guess I would say that I started out life as a dancer, very young, and my mother had wanted to dance and didn't get to. So, mothers can give their desires to their children, and that's what she did. And she gave me the love of dance. So I was a dancer, and then I became a social worker. And so you can see we don't get to the author part for quite a while. And so when I had some experiences in my life that I felt like I really wanted to write about, I had some stories to tell. Some of them were sad stories or, challenging stories, and I wanted to be good enough to do it, because when I was at the university and I was a professor, but I was a professor of social work, not of, literature or anything. So I gave myself my own course, I guess, in order to write this book. So because I had these experiences of first my son, being diagnosed with AIDS and a 4-year journey with that. And then 5 years later, my daughter had breast cancer. And of course, many women, and especially now, survived that, but she did not. So that was another long journey. But there was so many, this is going to sound funny, but there were so many wonderful things and magical things that happened during those journeys. And I wanted to be really good enough to tell it. So every summer, I would go to the middle of the country, the Iowa Writers Workshop, and get more information, and practice more about writing in order to create this book. And I'm pretty amazed and proud that I was able to do it. Although it's interesting, that particular program, there's a lot of people that come in the summer. And they might be lawyers or social workers or, accountants, people, but they have a story they want to write. And so we learn how to do that from that program.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Sheila. So this is the first book or this is the second book?
This was actually my second book. Yes. Earlier, I had written a book that was that came more from my social work experience of being a helper and how helpers need help and how we need to take care of ourselves. And by the way, the fact that I had done so deep, I had been dived so deep into that notion of taking care of yourself, which I don't know, in our country at that time, that was considered selfish. You shouldn't do that. Just, don't do that. But actually, what I learned and what we now know is that if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of anybody else. We just burn ourselves out. So, so that book, I think, undergirds the other books because we always need to come back to how are we doing? And when I was going through, I'm Warrior Mother, I had to be a warrior mother. I had to be, a lot of the time, I had to be the strong one. So my children didn't have to take care of me while they were going through what they were going through. And so I think I relied a lot on on that other notion of, and also being sure that I had sort of a backup of people that were holding me up. And it felt that way. It felt like I had my friends and some of my relatives holding me up while I was serving and helping my children.
Absolutely. And that is where, let's come to the book itself. How should we understand this book, Sheila? Is it about your book, your story, your journey, your fight back, or is it about something beyond that?
Well, of course, one of the things that one of the principles is the more personal, the more universal. So if an author can really reveal themselves, not just fake, but the real, if you can reveal your own vulnerability, then the author will recognize them, or the readers will recognize themselves, and that is, of course, what happened. So the reason I think that the book was won an award and everything is I used the same tools that you would use to write a novel. So dialogue and description, and so it takes the reader into my experience. So yeah, this would qualify, I suppose, as a mother's memoir, which is it's my story, but the more deeply I can be truthful about it, and my own experiences, the more the reader can identify and say, yes, that is true. You know what? All mothers have to be warriors at different times. I mean, and they don't tell you that. It's not in the job description.
Absolutely. Tell us a bit about this book, because it is a difficult book in that sense, to write about your stories as well as to make it about other stories also, make it relevant for others. Tell us a bit about your writing process. What is it that you have discussed or dealt with in the book, Sheila?
Well, I think in the journey of it, I think if I look at some of the chapters, that might be helpful, because
Yes.
yeah. So like in the beginning, in part one, I talk about my son coming out in terms of people did not know that he was gay. I mean, he knew he was gay, but so there's a process of that, which is anybody who has relatives or knows somebody who is a gay person. There was a time when it was, they were closeted. They didn't tell. They couldn't be who they really were in the social situation. So it begins with that, to say who my son was, or is at that time. And then one of the chapters is getting to yes. So when he was diagnosed, that was a death sentence. There was nothing in medicine that was going to fix it. And so interestingly, what he did was he very clearly went into caring deeply for himself and his own health. So because he thought, and he was right, that there was going to be not a cure, but something that he could live with this disease. That is what happened. But he was on the trial for that. And he just said, my job is to stay around, so I'm here when it happens. Now, he missed it by maybe 6 months, which was very hard to accept. But I know that he wanted to be a part of the solution. And so in my situation, my friends and my mentors said to me, find a way to say yes to this. Find a way to say yes to this. And that is the hardest thing. When something comes at us that we cannot change, we do not want, we would never order off a menu. And so we can't do anything about it. We have to find a way to say, yes, this is what's happening. And so now what? Now, how can we live with this? How can we make the best of this? How can we find, there's a place in the book where I would go into the shower and I would sing. I would sing, in the shower, there, your voice sounds pretty good because it's kind of an echo chamber, right? And so, but I would sing and rage, I just, and what I would do, I would rage at something good must come from this, something good. And so I tell about that. So what do we do when we have something we don't want and we can't change? And of course, we're going to feel bad about it and get in some bad moods sometimes. So I'd go in the shower and then I'd, dry myself off and go on with my life. And so this book is a book of discovery for me, because I realized that that's when I got into the notion that the arts were really ways to help myself and to help my family to be able to lift our spirits and deal with it. Like, so my next book comes from this book, the discoveries here, and as I went through this. And there's I wrote about something that people don't write about or even talk about very much. I wrote about the experience of being with my son when he died. And I call it the dying room, because we took the living room and we put the bed in the living room, the hospital bed, and did all that we could to make him comfortable and have his friends be able to come and be with him. And there were some really incredible experiences that I had never, as a social worker, known about. I'd never had anybody tell me what that was like. And the amazing experience that can happen when you journey with somebody as they cross. And it's just, well, the connection I've made, AJ, about that is, it's like when a child is born. The midwives know this is a magic time as that transition is happening. And so that is also true when people are leaving. If you can have a situation where they are comfortable, we do have the medical help with pain, relieving pain, and it's a time for people to, in the book, there was a friend who came by to drop something off to us, and she said, "It's really hard to leave here. I feel like I want to stay. There is so much love in this room. There is so much love in this house." So that was part of the understanding that I got from having been in that experience with my son.
Absolutely, Sheila. What is it that you want readers of your book to take from this particular book? Insights, message, what is it?
Well, I think some of what I've already said in the sense, first of all, even it feels better. I mean, I don't know. It feels better to know that what you're going through is you're not the only one, right? And also the things that I discuss in this book, because it's my experience, are things that, at least in most people don't have that opportunity. So actually, this is another thing about books, about our people's books, that we can live through the person writing it. We can learn a lot that will apply to our own life. Maybe it won't apply to your life until you're older, or some other circumstance comes up. But we learn a lot from people's personal stories, but also people's stories, just storybooks, that people have made a fictional thing. But even the fiction is based in reality. Or if it doesn't have a realness to it, then it doesn't hold any power. So that is another way that art helps us heal, is we read about, or we see a film, or we watch a play, or so we get ourselves, it's like we're practicing things that might happen in our lives, right? It could happen because the most human thing that happens is loss and death and losing what we love. I mean, guaranteed, and eventually leaving our own life.
Absolutely, Sheila. So, who is this book for?
Well, of course, when it came out, I began, well, even getting it published. I didn't tell you that part. So because publishers don't, at that time, grief doesn't sell. Grief doesn't sell. People, it's too hard. Nobody wants to read about that. And now this is since this book came out, that has really started to change pretty profoundly. And one of the big things that's changed about it, initially, this was a woman's book. In fact, it was published by She Writes Press. So women authors who could not find a place for their books. And a lot of them had themes that were of loss and grief. And so I think in our culture, and I don't know how it is in your, where you are, but it's not a manly thing, it's not a manly thing. Buck up, and that's good too. I mean, that we need, it's funny, we have to, that's the warrior part, sometimes it's hard for the woman, let's say, to be in the warrior position. And so if there's a man who is supporting her, he can be the warrior, but somebody's got to be the warrior. and we have that ability within us. All of us have that, but we don't always get to practice it, and don't always have the support to do it.
Absolutely, Sheila. Any new book you talked about? Any upcoming project?
Well, what I mentioned, I've started, how I got to, from this book to The Art of Grieving, was recognizing, looking back at the stories, how much art was involved. Like I told you, singing in the shower. I mean, that's art. I mean, that's, so I started writing a weekly blog, and because I think the discovery I made was grief is not just about death. We can have other things that are, it feels worse than death. I don't know if it is, but it feels like it. So a person who loses their livelihood, who loses the way to make a living for however it happened, and sometimes that happens in kind of a shameful way, like, we don't need you anymore. That doesn't feel very good. And doesn't booster your confidence, right? So that can be a very difficult grief journey, to first of all say yes to it. This is it. I can't do anything about it. Now what? And this sort of this notion of resilience, how we this, and also how this is how we get strong. We don't get strong by just nothing happening and hiding under our beds. When we don't like things. Anyway, I think these are universal challenges, and they can happen in many ways, not just the loss of a loved one, but also something that you love. In our country right now, I believe everyone is into grief. There's nobody that's not in grief because of what's happening in our country. And you can feel that way about your country or about your city or your town, if there's a flood, and all these treasured things are destroyed. So the one thing we can be sure of is change happens, right? The only constant is change. So then how do we, navigate that?
Absolutely, Sheila. There's much to learn from you about all these things, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you, learn more about your books, about the way you do things, about the way you write, the way you, there's so much to know for them.
Well, and I mentioned to you that earlier that I'm now putting my writing on Substack, And so that is a kind of international platform. And the thing that's exciting for me, AJ, is that there's a lot of really good writers on that. So I'm always a little shy about the fact that I didn't really take all those courses, you know. But of course, whatever we get good at, it's not just taught to us in school. You know, we have to do it. So that practice, my weekly practice of writing about grief as it related to whatever is going on in the world, you know, or the weather or the flood or the whatever. And that was a big education for me. And so I'm still continuing to kind of look through the lens. And I call myself a grief advocate because what I learned from this book and people's reaction to it initially was, oh dear, I don't know, you know. What I learned is that grief gives us gifts. It gives us gifts wrapped in not very good packaging, you know. So we have to kind of go beyond. We have to say, yes, this is it, and what is here? What is something that is here? That and maybe it's just appreciation and gratitude for what I have been given. Yes, I'm losing it now, but look at what I've had.
Absolutely. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of The Author's Voice with KAJ. Thank you so much indeed.
Oh, it's great to talk with you, AJ.